Hello everyone. So the topic of today is to learn CSS animations. Now many of us are quite familiar with HTML, CSS and even JavaScript, but the problem which occurs is even for experienced people in the industry, learning CSS animations is a bit of a task, and many of us are unfamiliar with CSS animations actually while focusing on JavaScript and other frameworks. So let's learn some CSS animations so that we have a better understanding of how they work and how we can actually use them when a use case arrives to build any kind of animation from scratch. So let's begin. So I'm going to begin this video by showing you an example of what we are going to build today. So this is the card which we are going to build. It's basically an image, and once you hover over it, you get your name and your designation. And as you can see, we have a flipping animation which we are going to cover in today's tutorial. So we are going to cover this in a lot of steps, which are we are first going to create a GitHub repo, then add some HTML content into our website. Then we will play around with CSS animations and hopefully I will explain you how they work. Then we can publish this flip animation on CodePen or somewhere where we can share it with others and hopefully have fun with all the things we are going to cover today. So let's begin with the first step, which is to create a GitHub repo. For that, we need to go to a website called as github.com. Here we can go to the repositories section and create a new repository. So repository is basically a online space where you store your project. So for this one, I am going to name it as Flipkart animation. Let's not have a description for now, I will write later. Then we can add a readme and choose a license like MIT and then create our repository. Once the repository is created, it is reflected in this project name. From here, we are going to clone this repository. So I'm going to copy the link of this repository from this code button and clicking on the clipboard icon. Then we are going to use VS Code for our project. So if you haven't downloaded VS Code yet, go to VS Code download website by searching VS Code on Google, clicking on the first link and download VS Code for your relevant OS. After that, go to your VS Code section and click on these three dots in the Git pane basically, and here you will find an option to clone a repo. Paste the Flipkart animation.git URL which we just copied right now and hit enter. I have selected my repo location and in some while it will get opened, and now as you can see we can view the code. Next thing which I usually do is adding a gitignore file. So I'm just going to go into a website called as gitignore.io. Here you can generate custom gitignore files. So I am going to ignore files which are made by macOS by default, by Windows by default, and by VS Code. And we will get a file like this. So these are basically the files which I don't want to be added into my online project workspace on GitHub because they are mainly the personal laptop files and should not be shared on GitHub. So what we are essentially going to do is go back to our VS Code editor, click on this plus icon and add a dot gitignore file and paste all the code here. The first command I usually make is adding the gitignore. So I'm going to my commit pane, clicking on plus icon and then clicking on commit staged. Then a good name for this commit would be added a gitignore file. Hit enter, then push the changes back to the repository, and once I have pushed the changes they will get reflected in this Git repo. So as you can see, gitignore got added. Our next task for the agenda is to add the HTML content. So let's focus on that. I'm coming back to my VS Code editor and creating a new file called as index.html. Here I will click exclamation mark and hit tab to add basic DOM layout. Then I can add a name like Flipkart animation. Once I have done that, I'm going to make use of a library called as Bootstrap. So this is basically a CSS framework which I generally use. So I'm just going to go to this website called as getbootstrap.com. Click on this download button and go to the code which is present here. Then copy this code and paste it in my head section to add Bootstrap into my project. Then I will right click and click on format document so that the code gets adjusted properly. Next I will add a div tag with the class flex, which stands for flexbox. Then we will add two properties for centering my box, which are justify content center and align item center. These are done basically so that I can center this card within my page. Like if you see, it is horizontally centered and also in vertically in the center position. So these three properties will take care of that. In addition to it, I will add another property which is VH100, which will give it 100% height. Next we will add markup for our flip card. So first is flip card obviously. Then we have another div which will contain the flip card content. Then my Flipkart content basically has two sides, right? Front and the back side. So we can add those two sides here. So we have a Flipkart front, then a Flipkart back, which will essentially contain the text when we hover over our card, which is this one. Then we need to add the image and the text here. So I am going to use an image from Pixabay, is this one, by clicking on download. So it is present on Pixabay by searching on developers. Then go back to my documents, HTML, CSS, Flipkart animation folder, and here I will create a new folder called as images. Within that folder I will save this image as profile.jpg. Then I will come back to my editor, add an img tag which is pointing to my images folder, and within that my profile image, and our text will be profile obviously. Now I want this to have a width of around 200px, so let's keep it that. Now let's open this index file in our browser so that we are able to see the changes in real time. So this is the one we are building, and this was the one which is already built. So I'm just going to focus on the one we are building currently. So this is my image, right? Then obviously we need some text below the image, like the name of the profile name. So let's say Dave Johnson, and then we have his designation, let's say social media manager, and as you can see text is displayed here, which will eventually put it at the back of our card. Now that we are done with our basic code, next thing that we are going to do is focus on our CSS part. So let's create a new folder here called as CSS. Within that, create a new file. So I want it within the CSS folder, index.css. Let's add a link to the CSS file using link tag with href css/index.css. The first thing that we can do is add some width and height to our flip card and add a border to it. So let's say this has a width of around 200px, height of around 250px will be sufficient, and let's say we have a border of 1px. Obviously border has to be solid, and some color code like light grayish code. So this is the border which is visible currently. We'll take care of the height later. Then we are going to focus on our Flipkart content. If you remember, we were actually flipping this card all over, right? So what we can do is, whenever someone hovers over our flip card, we can select that class like dot flip card and select hover property. So whenever someone is hovering over a flip card, I essentially need to rotate this image clockwise. So what we can do is, we can add a transform rotate property to our flip card content part using a dot notation. Within that, we can add a transform property and essentially tell it to rotate by 180 degrees. Okay, so if we add just rotate, it will rotate along x-axis, but I want it to be rotated along y-axis. So for that, we will use rotate y property, and as you can see, my image is flipping, but it is flipping very fast. So we can slow it down a bit. The way to do that is select our flip cards class. Within that, we are going to use a transition property which will slow down our transform a bit. Add the transition to our transforms cases, which is happening here, and slow it down to 1 second. Now, okay, it has to be on Flipkart content because that is where I added the hover. And now, hopefully, my flipping transformation should slow down, but it is not apparently. So let's check why it is happening first. So this is my Flipkart contain, which consists our transition property. Then we have a transform which is rotating our file. So why is it not slow? For now, let's just keep it like this. And next property which we need is, I think it was transform style property. So transform style property will actually give it a kind of a 3D effect instead of a 2D one. Then we need to add a perspective of around 1000 here. So perspective is basically used to make the transition a bit better. Now let's focus on the transition itself and let's check. So next thing that we need to do is to make these two elements uh, front and back of each other. So for that, we will take care of Flipkart front and back. My front. Then I am also taking care of card back. Let's keep the position to absolute as 100%. Height as 100%, and then we are going to use a property called as back face visibility, which will hide those two elements when they are in front of each other. Cool. So it is hidden now. Only thing is we have messed up somewhere here. We will check it out soon. Other than that, we can add a background to our Flipkart back. So let's take care of that. So let's add a background color to this one. Let's keep it light blue for now. Then text align center. Okay. Now I think only few of the properties are remaining, so let's focus on them. One such property would be, we will have to check. So let's check it out. So I have perspective added properly. Okay, even developers like me can mess up, so I'm just going to check whether we have messed up. So yes, Flipkart content has a position relative. I don't think that is messing up our styles. We have transform style added properly. But let's just add position relative width as 100%. Then this one is perfect. This one is perfect as well. And this one is the last one, but that is also working fine. Trend. Let's just check if rocket visibility is making any kind of difference. And add a transform rotate property. And this was missing. And S messed up our code, and this is how it works. Cool. So there was a spelling mistake. And that is how our Flipkart animation works. Next, we can make this text in the center. The way to do that is go back to our index.html, add a deflex, then justify content center, align item center, and add a flex column. So yeah, spelling mistakes happen, part of life, but that is how we learn. Then I think I can reduce the height a bit to 30px. This looks better. Yeah. Then I'm just going to add an attribution link to the image which we use right now. Let's add it below this div. Within a div tag. Add a flex column property here. And we have our code working as well. Then we can add some margin at the top, so that for that we can add empty code property. And we have a margin. So that's basically how we achieve Flipkart animation using CSS. Next we can go to CodePen. CodePen is a site where you can share your work, create a new pen. In the HTML part, add this entire code. I don't think the image will work, but let's keep it like that. Then in the CSS part, add this code. Then go to Cloudinary, which is my preferred image CDN. We go to media library. You can upload it anywhere in Cloudinary. File, I'm going to hit upload, browse, upload my image. Check this one. The reason why we are doing this is because local images don't work on CodePen. So we need to upload, then copy the URL and edit instead of using local URL paths for images basically. Now my image should work properly, but my bootstrap code won't be working, so let's fix that. First add something like Flipkart animation, then go to settings, go to JS, and we can add our JS source here. So I'm going to add the URL, which is this one. Then go to CSS, add the bootstrap CSS URL here. All external files are added like this. Hit save and close. Now if I change view to full page view, my code is proper. Then we can share this code with others. So that finishes our 3 steps, which were adding CSS animations and publishing the animation. Then you can share your work, and that brings us to end of today's tutorial. If you like this tutorial, please like the video. I'm going to share the URL of this animation repo so that you can fork it and use it from there. In order to learn more about this, you can go through W3 Schools. This is from where I came to know about this animation in the first place. Then, if you would like to see similar videos in the future, hit the subscribe button and share this video with others if there is anyone who would learn from this video as well. Thank you and have a nice day, everyone. Goodbye.